The night sky above Earth stretched like an endless blanket of stars. In the middle of the desert, far from any city lights, silence ruled. But tonight, that silence was broken by fire cutting across the heavens. A small craft, broken and burning, tore through the clouds before crashing into the sand with a terrible roar. The desert shook and the animals ran. From the wreckage came a figure, stumbling and weak. She was not human. Her skin shimmered faintly, pale silver under the moonlight, and her eyes glowed faintly blue as if carrying the memory of another sun. Her name was Serenia. Once she had been a proud Avari, a race known for grace, intelligence, and long lives. But that was before the war, before fire consumed her world, before she had lost her mate, her family, and everything she had ever known. Now, she was alone, stranded on a planet her people had only spoken of in whispers. Earth, the world of humans. She looked at the endless sand and sky, and for the first time in her long life she felt smaller than she had ever imagined. She pressed a trembling hand against her chest, where her heart still beat with sorrow. The memories of her husband, his last words before the warships consumed their home, echoed in her mind. She was alive, but she felt hollow. Her body ached from the crash. The desert air was dry and rough, filling her lungs with every shaky breath. She tried to walk, but her legs barely carried her. After a few steps, she collapsed into the sand. The stars above blurred as tears filled her eyes. She whispered in her own language, a soft prayer to the ones she had lost, asking why she had been spared when all she wanted was to follow them into the dark. But fate had other plans. Hours later, as dawn painted the desert in soft gold, a man rode across the land on horseback. His hat shielded his eyes from the rising sun, and dust trailed behind his horse's steady steps. His name was Ethan Cole, a cowboy whose family had worked this land for generations. Life was simple for him: cattle, horses, fences, and the open sky. He liked it that way. But as he scanned the horizon that morning, he noticed something strange: smoke rising from beyond the ridge. He guided his horse toward it, expecting perhaps a broken truck or a small fire. What he found made him pull his reins sharply. The wreck of a strange metallic craft lay half buried in the sand. It looked nothing like an airplane. Its surface was scorched black, and strange symbols lined the edges. His first thought was that he was dreaming. But then he heard a faint sound, like someone trying to breathe through pain. He dismounted quickly, his boots crunching in the sand. There, lying just a few steps away, was Serenia. Ethan froze. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her features were almost human, yet not quite. The shape of her eyes, the faint glow of her skin, the delicate lines across her cheeks that looked like natural patterns. She was hurt, that much he could see. Ethan was not a man to leave the wounded behind, no matter who or what they were. Slowly, carefully, he knelt beside her. "Hey there," he said softly, though he doubted she could understand. "You're hurt. Don't you worry, I'll get you some help." Serenia's eyes opened weakly. She saw a human for the first time, dressed in dusty clothes with a hat shadowing his face. For a moment, fear gripped her. Her people had always said humans were unpredictable, dangerous in their stubbornness. Yet when she looked into Ethan's eyes, she did not see cruelty. She saw concern. She tried to speak, but only a broken sound came out. Ethan shook his head gently. "Don't strain yourself. Save your strength." He slipped his arm carefully under her shoulders, lifting her with surprising gentleness for a man who spent his life working the land. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in her grief and injuries. Ethan carried her to his horse, whispering calm words to keep the animal steady. Somehow, even without understanding, Serenia felt the warmth of his voice calm her. She closed, her eyes again letting herself be lifted away from the wreckage of her ship. As Ethan rode back toward his ranch, dust rising behind him, Serenia drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time she opened her eyes, she saw wide skies, endless land, and the steady figure of the cowboy who carried her. She did not know his name, She did not know this world. But in that moment, for the first time since her mate had fallen, she felt a spark, small, fragile, but real. It was not hope. It was not yet. But it was something close. Ethan, on the other hand, wondered just what kind of stranger he had found in his desert. He did not believe in fairy tales or legends, but here in his arms was proof that the stars held secrets beyond imagination. He did not know her story, but he knew one thing for certain. He would not abandon her. The desert sun rose higher, and with it began the first chapter of a story neither the alien widow nor the cowboy could have ever expected. The ranch was quiet when Ethan returned with the strange woman in his arms. The morning sun lit the wooden fences, the barn, and the old farmhouse that had stood for generations. The cattle grazed lazily in the pasture, unaware that something from the stars had arrived among them. Ethan guided his horse into the yard and carefully lowered Serenia down, making sure she would not fall. He carried her inside, past the front porch, and into the living room. The place was simple. Wooden floors, old furniture, shelves filled with books his mother once read, and the faint smell of coffee from the pot he had brewed before dawn. He laid Serenia gently on the couch, pulling a quilt over her fragile body. For a moment he just stood there looking at her. She looked so different yet so vulnerable, like a lost bird that had fallen from the sky. Ethan ran a hand over his face, unsure what to do next. He had patched up injured animals before, even helped neighbors when accidents happened, but never had he dealt with someone not from this world. Still, he could see her wounds, scratches along her arms, a deep bruise on her side, and exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She needed care, not questions. He fetched a basin of warm water and a clean cloth. Kneeling beside her, he began to clean the dust and dried blood from her skin. Serenia stirred, her eyes opening slightly. Her gaze met his, and for a heartbeat she tensed, ready to pull away. But Ethan's touch was gentle, steady, almost careful in a way she had not expected from a human. "You'll be all right," he said softly, though he doubted she understood the words. "I'll take care of you." Serenia did not know the meaning of his speech, but his tone spoke more than language could. She saw kindness in his eyes, a calm strength that felt strange after the endless chaos of war. She whispered a word in her own tongue, the name of her lost mate. Ethan could not understand, but the sadness in her voice was clear enough. For the rest of the morning, Ethan tended to her. He wrapped bandages where needed, gave her sips of water, and kept the room quiet. When she drifted into uneasy sleep, he stepped outside onto the porch, his hat tilted low against the sun. He leaned on the railing, staring at the desert stretching beyond the ranch. "What in the world have I gotten myself into?" he muttered. He thought of calling the authorities, maybe even the military, but something deep inside told him not to. If the world found out about her, she would be taken away, locked up, studied, maybe worse. Ethan had no love for governments or men in suits. He had made a promise without words when he carried her from the wreck. She was under his protection, now. Inside, Serenia dreamed. She saw the flames of her world, the faces of her people, and the last moments with her husband. She remembered his voice telling her to survive, to carry on even if she had to walk among strangers. When she woke again, the ceiling of the farmhouse looked strange yet safe. She turned her head and saw the human cowboy sitting in a chair nearby, watching quietly. He did not speak at first, but when he saw her eyes open, he offered a small smile. "Good to see you awake," he said. He pointed to himself. "Ethan." He touched his chest as he repeated it. "Ethan." Serenia blinked, trying to understand. Slowly, weakly, she lifted her hand and touched her chest. "Serenia," she whispered. Ethan's smile widened. "Serenia," he repeated as best as he could with the strange rhythm of her name. She nodded faintly, a spark of connection forming between them. It was the first time since the loss of her people that she had spoken her name to another living soul. Over the next hours, Ethan tried simple gestures to communicate. He showed her water, pointing and saying the word. She repeated it, her accent, heavy but clear, He pointed to food, bread, and apple, and she tried those words too. Though she still carried the weight of grief, Serenia felt a strange warmth building inside her. The cowboy was patient, never mocking, never harsh. Each time she stumbled over a word, he encouraged her with a calm nod. By evening, the desert air cooled, and the sky turned orange with the setting sun. Ethan stepped outside to tend to his animals, leaving Serenia by the window. She watched him from the couch as he moved across the yard with practiced ease, guiding the cattle, fixing a loose gate, checking the water trough. It was all so simple, compared to the life she had known. No starships, no councils, no wars. Just a man, his land, and the wide sky. Serenia felt a pang in her chest. She remembered the love she had lost, and grief tried to rise again. But when she looked at Ethan, she saw something she had thought lost forever: the possibility of trust. That night, when Ethan brought her a blanket and placed it gently over her, she whispered in broken words, "Thank you." Ethan paused, then tipped his hat with a quiet smile. "You're welcome, Serenia." For the first time since the destruction of her world, Serenia closed her eyes not with despair, but with a faint sense of safety. She did not yet understand this human nor this strange land, but in her heart a small seed of peace had been planted, and Ethan, sitting nearby with his rifle resting against the chair, kept watch. He did not know what storms the future might bring, but he was certain of one thing: he would not let her face them alone. The days passed slowly on the ranch, each one filled with sunlight, quiet winds, and the rhythm of work. For Ethan, life had always been steady, fixing fences, feeding cattle, checking water lines. But now everything felt different. Inside, his small farmhouse lived a being not of earth. Every time he glanced through the window and saw Serenia resting on the couch or standing near the doorway, he felt like the desert itself had brought him a secret from the stars. Serenia grew stronger. With each day, the bruises faded, the wounds healed, and her energy slowly returned. Yet her heart still carried the weight of grief. Often she would sit by the window and stare at the wide horizon, as if searching for a world that no longer existed. Ethan noticed those moments, the sadness in her eyes, but he never pushed her to speak. Instead, he offered her simple kindness: a glass of water, a blanket when the nights grew cold, or a chair beside the fire when the wind howled outside. At first she had been afraid of this human world: the wooden house, the smell of hay, the sound of cattle. It was all strange compared to the shining cities she once knew. But Ethan's patience began to soften her fear. He showed her small parts of his life. One morning he guided her outside, letting her lean on his arm as they walked. The desert stretched endlessly, the sand glowing gold under the sun. Nearby, his horses stood tied to the fence, their dark eyes watching curiously. Ethan led her toward them. "This here's Scout," he said, patting the neck of his horse. The animal snorted softly, ears twitching. Serenia hesitated, unsure if the creature would accept her. Ethan noticed and gently took her hand, placing it on the horse's warm hide. The animal shivered but did not pull away. Serenia blinked in surprise. "Alive. Strong," she whispered in broken English. Ethan nodded. "Strong, yeah. Horses are loyal. You treat 'em right, they'll carry you anywhere." She looked at him, her silver blue eyes reflecting sunlight. Slowly, she repeated the word, "loyal." The cowboy smiled. Day by day, she was learning. As time went on, Ethan taught Serenia more words. She learned the names of things around the ranch: barn, saddle, sky, fire. Some nights they sat by the fireplace, and he would read from one of his old books, pointing to pictures so she could follow. She listened carefully, her voice soft as she tried to form the words after him. Each mistake made her frown, but each patient correction made her try again. But even with progress, the shadow of her loss never fully left. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Serenia finally spoke of it. Her voice trembled, her words slow. "My people, gone. My mate, gone. Only one left. Ethan turned his head, watching her face lit by the starlight. He could see the pain written in her expression. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned back, gazing at the sky above them. "I lost folks too," he said quietly. "Not like you did, maybe. But my ma passed when I was young. My pa too, some years later. Out here you learn quick that life can take what it wants. Only thing you can do is keep going, one step at a time." Serenia looked at him. She did not understand every word, but she understood the feeling. Loss, survival. The same threads ran through his life and hers. Something inside her heart stirred. Not relief, not joy, but the beginning of understanding. The next morning, she surprised Ethan by stepping into the yard without his help. Her steps were weak at first, but she held her head high. She reached the barn, where he was working, and lifted a tool awkwardly in her hands. "Help," she said simply. Ethan raised his brows, then chuckled softly. "All right then. Let's get to it." From that day forward, Serenia began helping with small tasks around the ranch. She carried water, gathered feed, and even tried to sweep the porch, though the broom was clumsy in her hands. Ethan watched her struggle but never laughed, only offering quiet encouragement. Slowly, she grew more confident. One evening, while repairing a broken fence together, Serenia paused and looked out at the land stretching before them. "Peace?" she said softly. Ethan glanced at her. "Yeah," he agreed. "This place has its peace." For Serenia, it was more than peace. It was healing. The endless sky reminded her of freedom, the quiet nights of safety. She still mourned her lost world, but here, under Earth's sun, she felt life moving forward again. Later that night, as she sat near the fire, she found herself whispering words she had not spoken since before the war. Words of thanks, words of hope. And as Ethan sat across from her sharpening an old tool, she realized something. She was not alone anymore. The alien widow who had once thought her heart would never mend was learning, slowly but surely, that even in a place far from her people, there was still a chance for life, for trust, and perhaps, though she dared not admit it yet, for love. The desert night was calm, the stars shining brighter than city lights could ever allow. Serenia sat near the broken wreck of her ship, which Ethan had helped drag closer to the barn so curious travelers would not spot it from the road. She had insisted on returning to it, saying in her soft, broken words that she needed to search for memory. Ethan did not argue. He simply followed with his lantern, keeping watch as she moved carefully among the twisted metal. Her fingers traced the ruined panels. Each mark told a story: the chase, the fire, the desperate escape from war. She closed her eyes, remembering the last moments with her people. She had fled not by choice but by order. Her husband's last act had been forcing her onto the small vessel. "Live," he had said. "Carry us forward." But carrying the weight of the dead was heavier than she ever imagined. Ethan watched her silently, leaning on the side of the wreck. He could see the sorrow in her every movement, the way her hands shook as if she feared the ship might whisper her losses back to her. He knew pain when he saw it, but this was a pain beyond anything he could fix with bandages or kind words. Serenia bent down, pulling aside a broken panel. Inside, her eyes caught the faint shimmer of light, small, blinking, steady. She froze. It was the emergency beacon. Somehow, it had survived the crash. Her breath caught. The beacon had been built to send a signal across the stars to call for help from her people, but her people were gone. That meant others would hear it, and not all who heard would be friends. "Danger," she whispered, her voice trembling. She turned to Ethan. "This call. Bad ones. Come." Ethan frowned, stepping closer. He didn't understand the technology, but he didn't need to. The fear in her eyes said enough. "So it's like a signal?" he asked slowly. "A flare in the sky for anyone watching." She nodded. "Yes, they come. Hunt." Ethan stared at the blinking light for a long moment. Out here in the middle of nowhere, trouble had found its way straight to his ranch. He sighed, scratching his jaw. Well, guess we better be ready then. Serenya's eyes widened. You... not run? Ethan gave a short, almost amused snort. This is my land. Been in my family a long time. Ain't about to let some strangers from the stars burn it down. She studied him, confusion mixing with something else. A strange warmth. Humans were reckless, her people had always said. Foolish. Yet this man's stubbornness gave her courage she thought she had lost. That night, neither of them slept. Ethan checked his rifle. The old one his father had left him. He moved through the barn, making sure the animals were calm. Serenya sat inside, her hands clasped tightly, whispering words in her language. They were not prayers for herself, but for the cowboy who had chosen to stand beside her. The next evening, the sky gave its answer. Strange lights shimmered against the horizon, moving too fast to be planes, too bright to be stars. Serenya felt her chest tighten. She knew those ships, the scavenger raiders. Once they had served the destroyers of her people, feeding on the ruins left behind. They had no honor, no mercy. If they found her, they would use her. If they found Ethan, they would kill him without thought. Ethan stood on the porch, rifle in hand, watching the lights. Looks like company's coming, he said calmly. Serenya stepped beside him. They want me. If I go, you safe. Ethan turned to her sharply. Don't talk like that. You think I carried you out of the desert just to hand you over to the wolves? Not happening. Her eyes softened. Why? You owe... nothing. Ethan tipped his hat slightly, a shadow of a smile on his face. Don't need to owe someone to do what's right. The words hit her harder than she expected. In her culture, loyalty was bound to duty and blood. But this man, this human, lived by something else. Choice. As the raiders' ships drew closer, the night lit with the hum of engines. The desert shook as the crafts hovered above the sand, kicking up clouds of dust. Strange shadows moved within. The lights. Ethan stepped forward, steady as if facing nothing more than a storm. Serenya felt fear rise in her chest, but she also felt her blood burn with something long buried. She had fought once, long ago, before grief had chained her heart. Now, beside this cowboy, that fire stirred again. She reached for a shard of metal from her wreck, shaping it into a blade with her careful hands. The glow of her people's technology pulsed faintly through it. Ethan glanced at her, gave a nod of respect, and raised his rifle. The raiders descended, their strange voices echoing through the desert air. Ethan and Serenya stood side by side on the porch of a lonely ranch, the stars above watching silently. It was an impossible fight, yet neither of them moved. For Ethan, it was his land, his duty, his choice. For Serenya, it was the first time since her people's fall that she refused to run from the dark. Together, they faced the storm about to break upon them. The desert, which had once been quiet, was about to witness fire again. The night cracked open with sound and fury. Engines roared above the desert as the raider ships hovered low, their lights sweeping across the sand like the eyes of predators searching for prey. The cattle in Ethan's pasture bellowed in panic, running wildly against the fences. The horses stamped and snorted in fear, pulling at their reins. Ethan stood firm on the porch, rifle steady in his hands. Serenya was beside him, her blade of alien metal glowing faintly in the dark. Though her heart pounded, she forced her body to stand tall. For the first time since her world's fall, she was not only surviving, she was ready to fight. The raiders emerged from their crafts. They were tall and thin, their armor patched with scraps of stolen technology. Their eyes glimmered with greed as they spotted Serenya. One of them hissed in a language Ethan could not understand, pointing straight at her. They know me, Serenya whispered, voice trembling. They want to take. Ethan's jaw tightened. They'll have to get through. Me first. The raiders advanced, weapons glowing with strange light. Ethan raised his rifle and fired. The sharp crack of the gunshot cut through the night. One raider stumbled back, clutching its chest, shocked by the human's weapon. For a heartbeat, the desert fell silent, as if even the stars were surprised that a lone cowboy dared to stand against creatures from the sky. Then chaos erupted. The raiders returned fire, blasts of energy striking the porch, splintering wood and sending sparks into the air. Ethan rolled behind a post, loading another round with quick, practiced hands. Serenia leapt forward, moving with the grace of her people. Her blade flashed as she cut through the air, striking down one raider who dared come too close. She had not fought in years, but muscle and memory returned like fire to dry grass. Every swing of her weapon was guided not only by skill, but by the raw will to protect the human who had protected her. Ethan shouted over the gunfire, "Stay close, Serenia. Don't let them separate us." She nodded, her blue eyes glowing with fierce determination. Together they pushed back against the raiders. Ethan's bullets found their marks, knocking down enemies with precision. Serenia's blade danced in the moonlight, cutting through armor with sparks. But the raiders were many. More poured from the ships, surrounding the ranch from all sides. Energy blasts struck the barn, setting the roof ablaze. Flames licked at the night sky, casting a fiery glow across the desert. The animals screamed in terror, and the land itself seemed to cry out. Serenia's breath came hard. "Too many," she said. "We cannot hold forever." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "We don't need forever. Just long enough to make 'em regret coming here." He dashed into the barn despite the fire, grabbing a bundle of dynamite left from his grandfather's mining days. Serenia followed, coughing from the smoke. Ethan struck a match, lit the fuse, and hurled it toward the raiders' ships. The explosion rocked the desert, sending sand and metal flying. One of the raider crafts collapsed in a burning heap. The raiders roared in fury, their formation breaking. Serenia seized the moment, leaping into the chaos. Her blade sang through the night, her movements swift and deadly. For a brief moment, the battlefield bent in their favor. But then, a blast caught Ethan across the shoulder. He fell back with a cry, dropping his rifle. Serenia's heart stopped. She turned, seeing him on the ground, clutching the wound. Rage unlike any she had ever known burned through her. She screamed in her language, a cry of both grief and defiance, and charged. Her strikes came faster, harder, each one fueled by the thought of losing yet another person she had come to care for. The raiders faltered before her fury, stepping back under the force of her assault. Ethan struggled to his feet, blood staining his shirt. He gritted his teeth and picked up his rifle again. "I ain't done yet," he muttered. With his free hand, he fired shot after shot, covering Serenia as she drove the raiders back toward their burning ship. Finally, with their losses mounting and their pride shattered, the raiders retreated. They dragged their wounded aboard the remaining craft and lifted into the sky, vanishing into the distance. The desert grew quiet again, broken only by the crackle of fire and the heavy breathing of the two who had defended the ranch. Serenia dropped her blade, falling to her knees beside Ethan. "You hurt," she whispered, her hands trembling as she touched his wound. Ethan gave her a weak smile. "Had worse. Still standing, ain't I?" Tears filled her eyes. She had thought herself cursed to lose everyone she cared for. Yet this human, stubborn and fearless, refused to fall. Something deep inside her heart shifted, a fragile thread, pulling her closer to him. Together they sat under the burning sky, survivors once more. But this time, Serenia did not feel alone. For the first time since her people's fall, she believed that perhaps she had found someone worth fighting for, not out of duty, but out of love, waiting quietly in the dust and fire of Earth's wide desert. The smell of smoke still hung heavy in the air the next morning. The barn roof was gone, the fences broken, and the ground scarred with blackened craters. Yet despite the damage, the ranch still stood. The cattle were shaken but alive, and the horses had been calmed. Ethan sat on the porch, his arm wrapped in a rough bandage. The wound throbbed, but he refused to complain. He had survived worse in the past, though never from enemies that came out of the stars. His rifle leaned against the wall beside him, cleaned and ready. Serenia moved quietly across the yard. She had not slept at all. Through the night, she had worked to put out the flames and gather what supplies had survived. But more than anything, she had stayed close to Ethan, watching him, making sure his strength did not falter. As she carried water to the porch, she looked at him with concern. "You fight with blood and fire," she said slowly, piecing the English words together. "But too many, they return." Ethan nodded grimly. "Yeah, they ain't done. Raiders like that don't take a beating and forget about it. They'll be back, angrier than before." Serenia sat beside him, her silver blue eyes shining in the morning sun. "Then, what we do?" Ethan tilted his hat back, thinking. "We do what folks always do out here when the odds are bad. We get smart. We don't fight their way, we fight ours." Her brow furrowed. "Together?" "Together," Ethan said firmly. For the first time since the loss of her people, Serenia felt the word carry true meaning. Her kind had fought as soldiers in great fleets, but always under orders, always for duty. This was different. This was a choice. Two souls, standing side by side because they wanted to. Over the next days, they prepared. Ethan taught Serenia how to use his rifle. At first, the weight was strange in her hands, the kick of the shot startling. But she was a quick learner, her steady aim surprising even Ethan. He guided her through every motion, his patience never wavering. At the same time, Serenia showed Ethan pieces of her people's knowledge. From the remains of her ship, she salvaged fragments of technology. With her skill, she shaped them into small devices, shields that could block energy fire. For a short time, blades that could cut cleaner than steel. She even managed to repair a broken console which glowed with faint light when powered. One evening, as the sun dipped low, they tested their new defenses. Serenia activated a shield, standing in front of Ethan as he fired his rifle. The bullet sparked harmlessly against the glowing barrier. Ethan whistled low. "Well, I'll be. That'll come in handy." She smiled faintly, pride touching her face for the first time in years. "Your fire. My shield. Stronger." Ethan gave a nod of respect. "Guess we make a good team." That night, they sat by the fire, exhaustion heavy, but spirit stronger. Serenia watched the flames dance and spoke softly. "On my world, we fought for leaders, for law. We fought because we had to. But it was not like this. Not choice. Not heart." Ethan listened quietly, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Out here, sometimes all a person's got is their heart. You choose who you stand with. And once you make that choice, you don't back down." She looked at him, her chest tightening with emotion she had not felt since before the war. "I choose." She touched her hand lightly to his bandaged arm, her voice trembling. "I stand with you." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then he gave her a quiet smile, tipping his hat. "Then we'll stand together. Whatever comes." The following night, the sky once again lit with distant lights. The raiders had returned, their ships larger this time, their anger burning brighter. The desert trembled with the sound of engines as they descended upon the ranch once more. But this time, Ethan and Serenia were ready. As the raiders advanced, Serenia activated the shield, a glowing wall that shimmered in the night. Blasts of energy struck it, but the barrier held firm. Behind her, Ethan fired shot after shot, each one finding its mark with deadly precision. The ranch that had seemed fragile days ago now became a fortress of grit and alien craft. The raiders shouted, in fury. But they were met with something they had never faced before. The unity of two lives bound not by blood, not by command, but by choice. Serenia's blade struck with alien speed while Ethan's rifle cracked through the night, the rhythm of their fight moving as if they had trained together for years. And for the first time in ages, Serenia felt alive, not as a widow lost to sorrow, but as a warrior reborn beside someone she trusted. The raiders, shaken and bleeding from their losses, hesitated. The desert wind howled around them, and in that moment, even they could see the truth. This was no easy prey. Together, the cowboy and the widow drove them back again, their courage burning brighter than any flame. The desert was quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. The ground was scarred, the air heavy with smoke, and pieces of broken metal glowed faintly in the sand. The raiders had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they left, broken and defeated, their ships limping away into the night sky. Ethan stood at the edge of the yard, rifle in hand, his hat tilted low to shade his tired eyes. His body ached from the long fight. His wounds burned, but he remained steady. He had promised himself that as long as he drew breath, no one would take his land or hurt the woman who now stood beside him. Serenia lowered her shield device. The glow flickered and vanished, leaving her breathing hard, sweat shining across her pale skin. She looked up at the stars, watching the last of the enemy lights fade. For years, she had stared at those same stars and seen only loss. Tonight, for the first time, she saw hope. Ethan turned to her. "They're gone. For now, at least." She nodded slowly. "Gone. Because of us. Because of us," he agreed. For a long while, they said nothing. The night wind blew softly, carrying the smell of dust and smoke. The cattle were restless but safe. The ranch was battered yet still standing. And in that silence, Serenia felt a weight lift from her chest. The weight of running, of mourning, of believing she had no future. She walked a little closer to Ethan. "You fight not for war, not for glory. You fight for home." Ethan gave a tired smile. "That's right. Always been that way out here. Land, family, neighbors. You fight to protect what matters. Guess now, that includes you too." Her eyes softened, and her throat tightened with emotion. No one had spoken of her like that since her mate had died. She had thought that part of her life was buried forever, but Ethan's words stirred something deep within her, something she had thought she had lost. The ability to be seen not as a survivor, but as someone worth standing beside. The following days were filled with work. Together they rebuilt the UR barn, mended the fences, and cared for the cattle. Serenia learned quickly, her hands steady and strong even with tasks she had never known before. At night she and Ethan sat by the fire talking in simple words, teaching each other pieces of their languages. She laughed softly at his stubborn phrases, while he listened carefully to the strange music of her alien tongue. Slowly, her grief shifted. It did not vanish. Love lost could never vanish, but it grew lighter. She carried it in a different way now, not as a chain pulling her down, but as a memory guiding her forward. One evening, as the sun painted the desert sky in red and gold, Serenia stood beside Ethan on the porch. The world stretched wide before them, open and endless. She looked at him quietly, her voice soft. "I thought my story ended. I thought no more love, no more life, only mourning." Ethan tipped his hat back, his eyes meeting hers. "Funny thing about life. It don't end where you think it does. Sometimes it starts over in the last place you expect." Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "Starts here? Right here," he said gently. She felt her heart beat faster. For so long, she had feared opening it again, afraid of breaking twice. But Ethan was patient, steady, like the earth itself. He did not ask her to forget the past. He simply stood beside her, strong and quiet, waiting for her to choose, and she did. She reached out, her hand brushing against his rough, calloused one. He did not pull away. Instead, his fingers closed around hers with a strength that was both firm and gentle. In that moment, she understood. Love was not about replacing what she had lost. It was about carrying the memory of it, while daring to build something new. Her mate had been her past. Ethan was her future. The stars above shone bright, and for the first time since the fall of her world, Serenia did not look at them with sorrow. She looked at them with wonder. Life on Earth would not be easy. There would be more struggles, more dangers. Perhaps the raiders would return one day, but she was no longer afraid. She had found someone who stood with her, who gave her reason to rise each morning and face whatever came. Ethan gave her hand a gentle squeeze, then spoke in his quiet, steady voice. "You've got a place here, Serenia. As long as you want." Her silver blue eyes glistened in the fading light. "I want here with you." The cowboy and the widow stood together, watching the sun sink behind the horizon, the wide sky stretching endless above them. Two souls from different worlds, bound not by chance, but by choice. The ranch, the desert, the stars, it all felt new again. And in the warmth of Ethan's presence, Serenia finally found what she thought had been lost forever. She had found love again, beneath the wide, endless sky of Earth.